Hello and welcome to the BME Horizon Hot Topics webinar, a weekly webinar brought to you by the Center for University-Industry Cooperation of the Budapest University of Technology and Economics. I am Borbála Schenk, the Chief European Research Funding Advisor, and my professional focus is to provide support for the researchers of the Budapest University of Technology and Economics in their successful participation in the Horizon Europe Framework Programme. The European research area is changing dynamically nowadays. We organize this webinar to help you, researchers and research managers, to get acquainted with the new trends and concepts that define the European research ecosystem. With the growing importance of achieving impact beyond the academia, open science, responsible research and innovation, we are required and also challenged to adopt new ways of thinking about research. These new ways are stimulated and incentivized by the European Commission as a prominent funder of research and also reflected in the Horizon Europe Framework Programme. With these weekly webinar sessions, we would like to spark discussions, show you good practices and novel perspectives, and want to help you to tackle these requirements with confidence. And our ambition goes even beyond that. We would like you to see the values, find the benefits, how these concepts like stakeholder engagement or open science can lead to new and exciting avenues of high quality research. Some housekeeping rules for today. The session is going to last till 1:45 p.m. I'm going to give a brief context for today's topic, then I will give the floor to our guest speaker who will hold a 15-20 minute presentation. Then we will open the floor for questions. Please add your questions in the Slido platform. If you are following us on horizon.bme.hu, the Slido is embedded on the page. If you are following us on YouTube, the Slido link is provided in the video description. The platform for questions is already open. You can add your questions and also you can upvote questions you like. Please be aware that we have a 160 character limit for questions. We already opened the poll in Slido. Please let us know where you are watching us from. Today's topic is open science. Open science is a modus operandi of the Horizon Europe Framework Programme. It is more than open access. It means opening up the whole research process. Open science appears in all pillars of Horizon Europe and includes different practices such as providing open access to research outputs, early and open sharing of research, open peer review, ensuring the reproducibility of the results, or open collaboration with knowledge actors within and beyond academia. Last week, Judith De Haan, the Open Science Program Manager of Utrecht University, was our guest, and she gave us an insight on how the university stimulates and fosters open science practices. The recording of that session is already available on our webpage. Today, we are also going to deal with open science, but from a different perspective. Our guest is Kelly Woods. Kelly is a senior associate publisher at F1000, which is a leading open research publisher, which is also responsible for looking after Open Research Europe, which is the new open access publishing platform launched by the European Commission. She has a background in open access scholarly publishing, and prior to joining F1000, she worked at Frontiers and the Royal Society on numerous open access titles. We are going to hear Kelly's perspective on whether traditional scholarly journals are still the gatekeepers of research, and Kelly will also introduce us to Open Research Europe, the European Commission's publishing platform that was launched in March this year. So Kelly, I am now going to give the floor to you. Please share your presentation.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me to talk today. I'm going to talk a little bit about how publishers are adapting to an open research landscape. And as was already mentioned, I will focus on the gatekeeping role of journals and also give you some information into Open Research Europe along the way. So within this theme, I would like to explore the gatekeeping role of journals and how that has changed, changes and new developments in peer review, the growth in open data policies and the potential ethical challenges that these pose. And finally, I will talk a little bit about the way we measure impact of research and how this is changing from a journal level focus to an article level focus. So firstly, let's explore the gatekeeping role of journals. Traditionally, journals, or rather journal editors, were seen as the gatekeepers of research. They got to decide what was published and what was disseminated and what wasn't through a process of closed peer review. This depended on the critique of an editor from the editorial board and a number of peer reviewers that normally remained unidentified to the authors. If the reviews were not favourable, then the paper would be rejected and this process would likely start again at another journal. For journals operating on a subscription model, it was fundamental that they only published the best and most impactful and interesting papers to ensure libraries and institutions saw the value in having access to content published in their journal. This process meant you could have faith that the content you were reading in these journals was good, sound science and had undergone scrutiny to prove its validity. With the introduction of open access and the article processing charge, the need to publish only the most impactful research waned, and we began to see an increase in journals publishing all sound or valid science, including negative results. Alongside this came the rise of the preprint server. So more and more nowadays, and especially since the COVID-19 pandemic, authors are choosing what to publish, whether that be in a non-impact based journal with peer review or on a preprint server without it. We've also seen a move away from the more traditional metrics that were calculated at the journal level, such as impact factor, with more emphasis being placed on the article level metrics such as views, downloads, and alternative attention scores like altmetrics. But I will talk a little bit more about that later. It seems that the role and importance of the journal in gatekeeping research is lessening, but the role of peer review remains really strong, and this continues to take place in a variety of different ways, which I will explore in my next point. I would pose that the peer review process, rather than the journal, was always the true gatekeeper of research, and we should not be asking whether journals are still the gatekeepers, but really we should ask whether this was ever really the case. On Open Research Europe, it's an innovative open access publishing platform that sits somewhere between a more traditional journal and a preprint server. So the submissions are checked by our in-house editorial team for a number of different measures, such as plagiarism. We check that appropriate methods have been used and that they've been described appropriately so they can be reproduced. We also check that appropriate ethics approval has been achieved. After passing these pre-publication checks, the papers are published as a preprint and they then undergo a post-publication peer review process. This is a very author-led model of publishing that does not rely on an external editor to make decisions about a manuscript, but still heavily relies on peer review to check the validity and the soundness of the science. The in-house editorial checks we have go some way to offsetting the mistrust that people have previously had in preprints by validating some basic elements of the paper before publication. And these sorts of checks are not always guaranteed on other preprint servers. So as academic publishing has changed over the years, changes have also had to happen in the peer review process to keep up. Traditionally, peer review was fully blinded and fully closed, but now both of these factors exist on a sliding scale. So both the authors and the reviewers might be known or unknown to each other throughout the process, or only revealed at the end of the process, or not revealed at all in the case of the reviewers. Peer review can also range from closed to open, with the full reports being shared at the end of the review process, during the process, or not at all. A summary of the requested changes, normally written by the editor of a paper, may be made available alongside the article instead of the full peer review reports. This open peer review model has raised a lot of questions around whether this makes people more or less likely to agree to review papers, and whether it might put early career researchers at a disadvantage, especially when being asked to review the paper of a more senior and well-respected researcher in the field. However, more data is needed to determine whether this is actually the case, as we do receive a lot of very positive feedback from the authors of papers that have undergone a fully open peer review process. They remark that it reduces the opportunity for bias and ensures the constructiveness of the feedback and the overall quality of the review due to its open and transparent nature. So on Open Research Europe, we operate an open peer review process whereby the authors actually suggest the peer reviewers that they would like to review their paper. We conduct some checks internally to make sure that those people are experts in their field, they have the relevant expertise, and that they don't have any conflicts of interest with the authors. And then we reach out and invite them to review the paper. Once the review is submitted, we do check for tone and quality of the review before publishing it on the website. And at that point, an email is sent to the authors to let them know that the review has been received. So on the website, you can see the original paper, the preprint, if you like, as it was submitted. And you can also see the peer review reports of the reviewers as they come in. Once the author has revised the manuscript, you can also see an updated version of the manuscript, but you can still have access to the older version. And you can see the response from the authors to the reviewers as well. So you can really track the evolution of the article throughout peer review. Although peer review may be considered the true gatekeeper of research, there are a number of issues with it in its current format. With a consistently increasing number of journals and articles to go along with that, the issue of reviewer fatigue has also been more generally discussed, with many journals and journal editors reporting that it's getting harder and harder to get researchers to agree to review a paper due to an overwhelming number of invitations to do so from a variety of journals. The issue of credit for the work of reviewers has also been widely discussed and is hotly debated. The idea of financial remuneration could be potentially problematic if it was felt reviewers were more likely to get invited or paid if they accepted an article rather than rejecting it. Particularly within the article processing charge model of open access publishing. Platforms like ORCID go some way to crediting reviewers for the work that they've done, but only if the peer review process is at least somewhat open. For fully closed peer review, the only form of credit researchers currently receive is in the list of reviewers the journal publishes at the end of every year, if it does that. More work needs to be done in this area to incorporate the time and effort that it takes to complete a good and thorough peer review report when assessing a researcher's contribution to their field. One of the newest developments in the peer review process is the involvement of artificial intelligence in review. A lot of publishers have started to use their own algorithms or make use of existing databases and software in order to match potential reviewers to incoming submissions to assist in swiftly finding reviewers for their papers. One open access publisher, Frontiers, has even taken this a step further and has begun to utilize artificial intelligence to assist in their research integrity checks with IRA, their artificial intelligence review assistant. According to the Frontiers blog, IRA reads each paper and makes recommendations, including on the assessment of language quality, the integrity of the figures, the detection of plagiarism, as well as identifying any potential conflict of interest of the authors. The increasing amount of academic research being published and the growing demand for high quality peer review makes it hard to dispute the need for the assistance of novel technologies in peer review. However, there are concerns that this rigorous and stringent process should not be handed over entirely to machines, and I have to agree. The use of these tools to aid and speed up the process could be revolutionary to peer review, but we should definitely be cautious about relying on software such as this to make such complex decisions, especially if the rationale for its decision making is not made open, transparent, and clearly available. And just to clarify, Frontiers do use IRA to assist in their decision making when they're assessing all of the papers that have been submitted to them, but they are still there are still humans working in that office that back up these checks. So I'm not suggesting that they have fully handed over to artificial intelligence. I'm just wary of if that were to happen. Peer review forms a major part of the validation process, but open data policies are also becoming more prevalent and more important given the current reproducibility crisis. Of course, making your data open alongside your article makes it much easier for others to conduct reproducibility and replicability studies, and is another way you can garner more trust in your research work. However, it can be confusing to determine how and how much of your data to share. The FAIR guidelines are a great place to start to make sure you're sharing your data in a useful and findable way. And there's a wealth of information available on their website, which is go-fair.org. At Open Research Europe, we do operate on an open data policy. We provide extensive guidelines to assist with this process that are fully compliant with the new open data requirements laid out in the Horizon Europe grant agreement. We ensure that the data is deposited into a trusted repository and provide a large list of suggested repositories that people can use. And of course, they can always email us to ask if they really don't know where to start with this process. We know that open data can seem quite intimidating the first time, and so we are on hand to advise. We also recognise that there are times that you may not be able to share your data or make it open due to the nature of the data itself. Maybe it contains identifiable data, or due to any intellectual property restrictions that have been placed on your work. Under Horizon Europe, it is imperative to think carefully about the expected results of a grant to ensure appropriate intellectual property rights are defined from the onset of a research project and form part of the grant agreement. So, if there is a valid reason for the results to be kept closed, this has been agreed and documented clearly in the grant agreement. It's also worth mentioning that making something open does not mean it is left unprotected. Work which is made openly accessible can still be protected by copyright licenses and other related rights with regards to how the work can be reused and exploited. We would strongly encourage grantees to make use of the European Intellectual Property Help Desk for all their IP-related queries and concerns to ensure that they can comply with the open access requirements of their grant agreement while safeguarding the results and data where necessary. Finally, just to say that while there are still some ethical issues around making science fully open that require further work within the academic publishing community, the benefits of open science, both for the author and the reader, far outweigh the potential risks. And then finally, I just wanted to remark on the changes that have happened in how we're assessing research impact. So historically, people only really used journal level metrics to assess research impact. So where you published your work told us how impactful it might be based on the impactfulness of other published outputs in that journal. The main metric used here is the impact factor, which relies on citations accrued over a certain number of years, but there are other metrics as well that do similar things. A lot of universities also put a lot of weight on the quartile position of the journal within its Web of Science category or the JCR category to determine the impact of the published works within it. While this is still largely true, there is a shift happening towards focusing more on the article level metrics, with more emphasis being put on measuring the individual article performance rather than the journal as a whole. This includes counting the views and downloads of an article and later on the individual citations to that article. Then came altmetrics, which counts many other forms of attention an article might receive, including blogs, Mendeley saves, and social media mentions. This shift in focus from journal to article is a step in the right direction, but much more work is needed in this area. Given that I work on Open Research Europe, I am always really interested in how the European Commission is asking researchers to assess the impact of is asking beneficiaries to assess the impact of the grants that they have received, and how the European Commission is assessing the impact of their latest grant programme, Horizon Europe, as a whole. So to give you a little bit more information about that, Horizon Europe is currently being assessed under 3 brackets, or will be assessed under 3 brackets rather. The first is scientific impact, societal impact, and then finally economic impact. So under scientific impact, the European Commission wants to make sure that they are creating and diffusing high quality new knowledge, skills and technologies to find solutions to global challenges. Under the societal impact branch, they want to see how much they are strengthening the impact of research and innovation by developing, supporting and implementing EU policies and supporting the uptake of innovative solutions in industry and society to address global challenges. And finally, under economic impact, they're trying to foster all forms of innovation, including breakthrough innovation and strengthening market deployment of innovative solutions. So they're really trying to assess the impact of the work, not just in terms of citations and scientific impact, really focusing on societal and economic impact as well. And this is an area that I'm really interested to explore within Open Research Europe, to try to get some metrics on our article pages to link the articles themselves to the demonstrated societal or economic impact as well. But this is all work in progress, so don't go rushing to the website to see it, because it won't be there yet. That's all I had for you today, really, as a bit of an introduction to how publishing has changed and how publishers are adapting to this new open research landscape. So thank you for listening, and I would welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for this thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you.
Just let me ask the first question. We have received many questions on Slido, and I'm going to share the Slido present screen in a moment. But while I'm doing that, could you please give us some data, some numbers on how many articles do you have or have you published since March and the platform was launched?
Sure, yeah. So the platform went live in March, and since then we have published, well, when I last checked on Friday, we had published 138 articles on the platform, and 55 of those have already passed peer review at this time. The vast majority of those articles, so about 60%, are original research articles, and the other 40% is made up by our other diverse article types, such as a brief report or a software tool article, case studies, reviews, all of these sorts of things. And then in terms of the subject's content that we're covering, we have now received submissions from across the board. So the European Commission break down their grants into the 6 Frascati subject areas, which are natural sciences, you're testing me now, medical and health, agriculture and vet, engineering and technology, humanities and social sciences. So we have received submissions from all of those different subject areas. Some areas are doing better than others, so we are looking now to investigate why we're receiving more submissions, for example, in social sciences and engineering and technology compared to agriculture and vet, and how we can adapt the platform to make sure we're meeting the needs of all of the researchers that we're covering.
Thank you very much. It is very interesting for us to hear that you have a lot of submissions on the engineering track, so we would be happy to check them out. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so let's see the questions we have received so far. Please add your questions to the Slido platform or upvote questions that are already there. Okay, so has IRA been tested for bias? We know a lot of current artificial intelligence unintentionally amplifies discrimination. That is the first question on my list.
Yeah, so I wasn't actually involved in the development or the testing of IRA during my time at Frontiers, so I wouldn't like to speak too much to that, especially seeing as I don't work there anymore. But the Frontiers has released a really useful blog post about it, and it has also been mentioned a lot of times, I think, in in other news outlets anyway. So it's definitely worth investigating that and seeing what else they say about it in their blog. But that's not something that I know much about in depth, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Let me just jump to a question which is very important to understand the whole context of the operation of Open Research Europe. How do you protect yourself against flooding your platform with original, unique, but irrelevant or inferior research papers?
Wow, that's a really good question. So I guess the way that firstly, you have to be funded by Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe in order to publish on the platform. And we can probably all agree that a very small percentage of the research that's funded by Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe could be classified as irrelevant or inferior to begin with, but assuming there's still some in there. The way that we protect against this primarily is through the pre-publication checks that I mentioned. So we're making sure there that there's no massive plagiarism issues, image manipulation issues, that appropriate ethics approval has been achieved and we can see it. We actually check that it's there, that the paper is well written, well structured, that the science seems sound and that the method sort of makes sense. So that's how we sort of protect ourselves there. And then obviously with the peer reviews that come in, we learn a little bit more about the papers at that point and what the other researchers in the field think about it. Only once an article has passed peer review it's at that point that we then send it to indexes such as PubMed or Scopus. Now, to be clear, we're not currently indexed in PubMed or Scopus because the platform is too new. We are preparing to submit applications to them once we meet their entry requirements. But just to say that we would only submit papers for indexation that have passed peer review and have got that stamp of approval from the community. Thank
you very much. It is very important to know and to underline again that Open Research Europe is currently providing only for publications that are coming as results of H2020 and Horizon Europe projects. I do not want to go into deeper what the future plans are, but we hope that this will expand. But currently, that is the case. Hey, you got many positive feedback from authors. How many negative response came back? Also, the positive opinions came from authors whose paper got accepted. Okay, we have a tough audience today. So
I know. So the majority of the feedback that I talked about has actually come from the other platforms that F1000 has launched. So obviously Open Research Europe only been live since March, only had 138 papers and 55 that have passed peer review. However, F1000 Research has been around for about a decade, operating on the same publishing model, and the Wellcome Open Research, which is the Wellcome Trust platform, has been around for 4 years, again operating under the same post-publication peer review model. Wellcome Open Research actually last year or this year hit the milestone of becoming the most popular venue for Wellcome funded researchers to publish in, which I think means the majority of people are enjoying publishing there if the majority of them are choosing it as their sort of home to put their article. Specifically thinking about Open Research Europe, now we have received a significant number of submissions. We have recently sent out an author survey to everybody that has published with us, so that we can get a little bit more feedback specifically on our platform, what's working well, what isn't working well, and what can we fix. So keep your eyes peeled on our Twitter account and our blog, because we will share the results from that survey once we get them.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, there was a point about negative responses. One thing that has come up is the time that it's currently taking us to do our pre-publication checks. So it does say on the website that papers can be published and made available online within 2 weeks of submission, which is very much true. But that does depend on the level of revisions that our pre-publication team is asking you to do. And I think the majority of the issues we're facing there, especially within the engineering and tech field, as we already mentioned, are around open data. So make sure that you're reading our guidelines and everything is fully compliant when you submit, and that's going to make sure that your paper is published on the website as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and what is your experience with the duration of the peer review process?
How long it's taking on average?
Yeah, if we can say that.
Yeah, sure. Let me just grab the most up-to-date stats for you, because that is not in my head at the minute for some reason. Bear with me. Do you want to move on to another question whilst I just pull the
Yeah,
latest?
absolutely. Hey, I love this question. It's great to make papers open. Can you also make them accessible, for example, easy to read and understand by non-specialists?
Yeah, this is a great question, or statement, really. So we do ask authors to submit a plain language summary along with their articles. We're not making it mandatory at the minute, but about 50% of our authors are choosing to submit this plain language summary. Sort of citizen science angle and making the science open to non-specialist readers was something that the European Commission was really committed to with the platform. It's not something that we've done a lot of work on yet. I think we're more focusing on getting the platform off the ground, raising awareness, making sure people know it's not a repository and it is actually a publishing venue. And then we will revisit what else we can do to promote these plain language summaries, how we can really get this content out there to a non-specialist audience.
Thank you. That is like already a great achievement. You managed to find the stats?
I did, yes.
Okay.
So currently the average time from publication to passing peer review is 79 days. And it's taking us on average 30 days for a paper to pass our pre-publication checks. So in total, we're looking at about just over 100 days from submission to passing peer review.
Oh, wow.
It's worth mentioning.
That's impressive.
Though, yeah, I mean, it's pretty quick. It's not as quick as we maybe would have hoped. We're definitely looking to improve that a little bit. I think mostly bringing down the pre-publication check time is our main focus here. But yeah, it is worth mentioning that the peer review reports are available as and when they come in. So we don't hold them until we have to and then provide you with both. So you can begin working on the revisions for your article. You can even choose to submit a new version off the back of one review whilst we're waiting to get the second review in if you want to. So progress can still be being made in the background.
Okay, great. Another question. I'm not entirely sure whether I understand it clearly, but let's see but you're still looking for a high impact article to publish, right? Not just methodologically sound ones like PLOS ONE or scientific report.
So we don't reject any papers based on perceived impact, which I think is what the question is asking. So our pre-publication checks are really just making sure that the papers are methodologically sound. As long as they're sound and they are funded by Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe, they can be published on the website as a preprint. Whether or not they pass peer review is kind of not up to us. That's up to the peer reviewers. We'll endeavour to make sure that they receive those peer review reports. But no, we're not specifically looking for just articles that are going to be perceived to be high impact. We are looking to capture all of the research output from the European Commission. That was something that they were really passionate about. They didn't want any research that they're funding to be wasted because it's not perceived as impactful. So even negative results as well are welcome on the platform.
And what happens with those articles that do not pass the peer review process?
Yeah, obviously it's not something that happens very often, and we do strongly encourage authors to provide us with additional suggestions for peer reviewers. We can provide suggestions as well, and we would strongly encourage an author to revise their paper based on the revisions that the reviews that we receive. If the author decides that they don't want to pursue the article anymore and they do not want to make the revisions, I mean, we can't force them to do that, but technically the paper has already been published, so it cannot be withdrawn and submitted to another journal at a later date, for example, unless it's been really significantly changed. So the onus there is really on the author to revise the paper and get it to a place where it can be where it can pass peer review. But it's very rare that they just abandon the paper there in its preprint state.
Okay, thank you. I guess you pretty much answered the next question. The reviews are openly available. They are. But
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question on that. Have you experienced sparking some kind of a scientific dialogue or communication based on these reviews regards to the articles on Open Research Europe?
So all of the articles do have commenting open on them. It's not a feature that we see many people engage with. This has been across F1000 Research and all the related platforms, actually. People are really keen to spark this scientific debate, but when the commenting feature is actually available, nobody uses it, which is a shame. But given that the peer review reports are made available and the information about who that peer reviewer is, where they are based, is also made available, it is quite easy for readers and also the author to get back in touch with that peer reviewer and start a conversation there. So this is feedback that we have received previously, that because the identities are all made open, these people can start a conversation outside of the article and potentially start up a new collaboration around this area of research that clearly they're all interested in.
Thank you. Another question that has partly been already answered is how you select the reviewers, right?
Yeah, so we do ask, so it is an author-led model of peer review. So after the article has been preliminarily accepted after our pre-publication checks, we ask the authors to provide 5 suggestions of people they would like to peer review their article. We then go through a verification process to make sure that they don't have any conflicts of interest, that they have the required expertise, etc., like I already mentioned. And we also try to make sure that the reviewers they've provided are as diverse as possible, meaning geographically, gender, career stage, all of that sort of stuff. And we'll also see if we think we need an expert statistical reviewer or something like that in addition to the ones that have been provided. So primarily we go off of what the authors tell us. We do also have our own software, as I mentioned in the talk, that helps us to match potential reviewers with incoming papers. So if we're struggling, we can provide suggestions from our side as well. But we try to use the suggestions from the author first. They know their research best. They should be able to tell us who will be best placed to review it.
Thank you. Is it a prerequisite for publishing in Open Research Europe to provide open access for the data?
Yes, it is, but that shouldn't come as too much of a surprise because it is a prerequisite for Horizon Europe now as well that the data be made open. As I mentioned in my talk, we do operate on an as open as possible, as closed as necessary open data policy. So if there is some reason, whether it be that the data is identifiable or an IP issue that the data cannot be shared, that's a conversation that we can have. We might have to see your grant agreement to see if it's detailed in there, but exceptions to the rule can be made, but generally speaking, yes, the data should be made as open as possible.
Thank you. And the last but one question, very interesting one. May the same paper appear both at the Open Research Europe platform and in a journal? What is the copyright plagiarism impact factor policy then?
No, a paper cannot appear on Open Research Europe and on another journal or publishing platform. So Open Research Europe is not a repository, it is not a preprint server, it is a publishing platform similar to that of a journal. So once you've submitted it to us, it gets its own DOI, it is considered published, and it cannot be resubmitted to any other publishing platforms or journals.
Absolutely. Yeah, just I said last but one question, but please let me allow 2 questions, okay?
Yeah, sure.
One is that what is your experience with the researchers who are publishing on Open Research Europe? Are they junior researchers, senior researchers? Do you have some kind of a data on the ratio? Or
yeah, unfortunately, we don't right now. We don't ask those sorts of questions of the authors when they're submitting, but it is something that we have asked in our author survey. So once we get the results back from that, check the blog, and I should be able to provide some stats on that then.
Okay, thank you very much. And we noticed that you are teaming up together with Liber, Eurodoc, Global Young Academy in order to promote open science and make open science more accessible and more known as a concept. Can you mention any steps apart from Open Research Europe that you are participating in promoting open science?
With Liber and
with all these.
So the partnership with Liber, GYA and Eurodoc is mostly to help us with promotion and syndication of the platform, but they also help us with regards to the sustainability of the platform. So what I mean by that is the current contract between the European Commission and F1000 runs for 4 years. After that 4 years is up, Open Research Europe will definitely still exist in some other format. I just might not be the face of it. It may move to another publisher. It could be run by an external group. We really don't know what will happen to it at that point. But a big part of our contract is to ensure that when that happens, we can provide a full handover to whoever's taking over. So there will be no disruption in service either to authors or readers of the platform at this sort of change of hands juncture. So a lot of the work that we've been doing is talking to researchers, talking to our partners, Liber, Eurodoc and Global Young Academy, about what they think the best steps would be for the sustainability of the platform, for the future of the platform, how it should continue going forward. So that's probably the main way that we're collaborating with them outside of just promoting ORE.
Okay, thank you very much. So as a summary of this whole very interesting and lively discussion, what would be the selling points of Open Research Europe in your opinion?
The selling points?
Yeah, we wanted to sell it for our researchers. Please publish there in Open Research Europe.
The main benefits that I see for Open Research Europe is the immediacy of it. So the paper can be made available online in as little as 14 days, as I said, assuming that you pass all of our pre-publication checks quite quickly. You have the ability then to promote that research on your own social media or through your university platforms without fear that you're going to be scooped by somebody else getting the paper out there first, because yours is already out there. The second main benefit that I see is us removing the burden from beneficiaries of Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe when it comes to compliance with all the open access requirements. Me digging into the grant agreements and trying to figure out exactly what you have to do to be compliant has been confusing. I have learned so much over the last few months, so I can only imagine how confusing it is for the scientists as well to understand, or researchers rather, exactly what they have to do to ensure compliance. So that's probably the other big thing I would say, that you don't need to worry about that. If you're publishing with ORE, it's already fully compliant.
Thank you very much. Those are very important benefits, and thank you very much for summarizing them. And also, I would like to thank you for your readiness to answer all these questions and for the very insightful presentation. I just would like to show the poll. Yeah, we have, so which city the audience who's visiting us from? We have the majority of people from Budapest, but we also have people from Debrecen and also from Stockholm. And I would like to show you the flyer for the next week's presentation. I was just checking whether you can see it. Next week, we are going to deal with open science from another perspective, which is citizen science. So we are going to delve into citizen science practices, how to start with citizen science, how to integrate citizen science in the research design. And our guest will be Alice Shepherd, who is a community manager at University College London. So I would like to thank you again for your active participation, and have a nice rest of the day. See you next week. Goodbye.